You are listening to Fantha Tracks.
It's time to head south with the Fantha From Down Under. Here's your host, Adam O'Brien.
Welcome, folks, to the first episode of the Fantha From Down Under for January 2025. I'm your host, Adam O'Brien, coming to you live from Queensland's Canberra on the Gold Coast of Australia. Here on a very rainy night on the Gold Coast, and there's quite a bit of sci-fi action happening here on the Gold Coast right now. One ex-Superman, we should say, has been down to the local GW shop down at Broadbeach. That is, of course, Games Workshop, and bought up a ton of Warhammer. That is, of course, Kal-El himself, Henry Cavill, folks. Yep, soon to be the Highlander. And right now, well, he's helping five lion robots, get together down here on the Gold Coast. I was actually down at Broadbeach when that news went out that he was actually down in the vicinity. I was at Pacific Fair, doing some shopping of my own and enjoying a Cuban sandwich and a latte. And that's when I heard Kal-El's down there. And a huge shout out to, of course, Henry. Not that he'd be listening to this podcast, but kudos to him for being the big nerd that he is, because we're all nerds ourselves as well. He loves his Warhammer, and so do we. I'm sure he loves Star Wars. But I digress. We're going to be here tonight chatting about some of the news that's out on new stuff coming from Star Wars. Moving forward from what Fantha From Down Under will be looking at this year, we won't be looking forward so much. This is a podcast about looking back. And the time period that the majority of my Star Wars fandom was in GL's run. So we're going to be talking a lot more about that over the next 12 months, once a month, of course, on Fantha Tracks Radio. And we're going to have a bunch of the great other hosts on this podcast when we can. I've got some very good pals that we've had, not only on this show, but we've had them on the Lethal Mullet podcast a number of times on the Phantom Podcast Network as well. And, of course, on that network, we've had Mark Newbold, one of the founders of this here channel. And we've also had Eric Onkenhout, who's going to be on the show in the next month too. So February is when we'll get him on, and he's coming all the way from Boston, Massachusetts in the USA, and he loves his books. He's an avid reader. He's a good writer as well, folks, so go and check out his work. Does a lot of different stuff out there. But, and of course, he's part of Fantha Tracks, so you'll see his work on the channel and on the webpage too. Lots to see, lots to do. If you want to follow Fantha Tracks, you can catch it at fanthatracks.com. You can catch this show also on the Fantha Tracks Radio Network with all the other great stuff, like, of course, the flagship show with Mark and Mark. That is, of course, Making Tracks. I keep getting always mixed up, of course, with our own show on FPN, which is, of course, Making Treks, which is a Star Trek one, where we do the same. We look back at Star Trek. There'll be lots on there. Hopefully we'll get Brian on and the rest of the gang and chat at all sorts of Star Wars fun on here. Mooncat, love to chat to him again too. Lots to look at, lots to look forward to.
Hi, this is Adrian Rawlins, and you're listening to Fantha Tracks.
Oh, there you go. We've got a little bit of storm happening, folks. Maybe it's the Empire coming down through the clouds to take us all out. Or maybe it's just Vader up there moving his feet. Who knows? All right, so James Mangold, talking about, I guess his latest movie, and he's in everything from Screen Rant to Star Wars Newsnet and, of course, Dark Horizons, which we'll talk about in a second, just to see what exactly is he saying out there and what is this news. James Mangold is somebody that, no stranger to Lucasfilm, because he worked on the last Indiana Jones. And we're going to say he's done some really nice films, 3:10 to Yuma. Probably my favourite that he did. It's a classic when it comes to how the Western sort of rolled out. It's Die Hard to a certain extent on the West. And I do believe Russell Crowe and Christian Bale really got some of their better performances out of that movie. It's really, really well done. And he's a great director. He's worked on two of the Wolverine pictures with Hugh Jackman, Logan and The Wolverine back in 2014. The one that's set in Japan, that's based on, of course, the 1980s run of Marvel Comics, which was all about the samurai and all that sort of stuff. It's been a long time since I've read those comics, folks. I was a huge X-Men fan when I was a kid, but I've sort of moved on from Marvel. Even the new Marvel Star Wars, I've kind of moved on from, because they just don't cut it like Dark Horse does. I'm sorry. Dark Horse really had everything covered beautifully back in the day. But then again, classic Marvel Star Wars, yes, that was good.
Hello, I'm Dennis Lawson, and you're listening to Fantha Tracks.
Courtesy, of course, of Dark Horizons, Mangold, obviously, talking about his new film and where things are going to go. He's also talking about the Dawn of the Jedi film. Now, let's not get that mixed up with the Dawn of the Jedi comics. Okay, remember we were talking about a little while ago? You know, the great comics that came out just towards the end of the whole owning, of course, of Dark Horse with Star Wars at the time. They did a great run, which I really enjoyed, actually. I thought it was pretty well done for what it was. And that is, of course, Dawn of the Jedi. And it looked at how the Jedi came to be and how they were collected to go to Tython. Check it out. I'm sure that Marvel will put that in a trade paperback like they're doing with all the stuff that came together for those. This one looks like it's set 25,000 years before the events of the OT and expected to deal with the very first users of the Force and the origins of the Jedi Order. The writer on this is the guy from House of Cards, Bo Willman. Obviously, you know, going back to Last Jedi, where they're in the temple, right, on Ahch-To, and we saw that stone thing in the ground that was the prime Jedi, so the first Jedi. There's not a lot of lore there. Not a lot for, you know, anyone to really grasp a hold on, really. So Mangold says this is, again, you can find this on darkrises.com. Fantastic website, and if you are not checking out that website daily, you should. Mangold says that we're taking a place in the past so distant, he's got full creative freedom. So he says, to me, the really important aspects are the freedom to make something new. Bo and I, in relation to Star Wars, have been working on a script, and we'll see what happens. Do we find a way on the page to just say something original? Star Wars movies would be taking place 25,000 years before any Star Wars movies take place. Or this Star Wars movie. It's an area and a playground that I've always wanted to explore and I always inspired by as a teenager. I'm not interested in being handcuffed by so much lore at this point, and it's almost immovable, and you can't please anybody. Now, is he not right? To be honest, I think Star Wars, the cinema and the TV stuff, needs a bit of a break itself too, to find itself again. The biggest thing is with creativity in any form. When you have limitations on things, you become more creative. You think about GL and the original films and even the prequel trilogy. The biggest thing he was handcuffed with was the technology, what was available, what was actually going to give him the ability to tell the story. Now, you can do just about anything. So again, that ideas in some parts could be lazier than they would be by somebody being more creative. There's some pretty damn good Star Wars out there, don't get me wrong. But at the same time, it doesn't really crack it like the other stuff does as well. You know, you have that too. Now, the other one they're talking about is, and this is courtesy of the Newsnet, this is something I've only just seen today, which I'm not surprised because, to be honest, it's bloody amazing game. And that is, of course, Knights of the Old Republic. And there's rumours going around that there is a TV series going to be taking place, or a streaming series on Disney Plus in the Old Republic. Now, this is a no-brainer. Like, I've got to say, this is an absolute no-brainer. Perfect period, way away from everything. The best thing with the last one that came out, which was set 200 years or 100 years before, Phantom Menace, that was great. It was a great idea because why? You're not hampered by everything. I mean, yes, Yoda was in it, and so was Ki-Adi-Mundi-Mundi. But anyway, like it's there, isn't it? But if you put it into a different time like this, I mean, you know, the Acolyte was stuck heading towards the prequels, and you know, there's obviously Darth Plagueis in there and all that sort of stuff, and you know, there were ideas there that were pretty decent. I tell you one, amazing bloody lightsaber fights. And if anything, that's the one thing they need to sort of look at too, because I think they're getting a bit stale. But they did that well on that show. That was really well done. The big thing to bring into it is start to get away from classical sort of style. We're sort of seeing that. Obviously, there was a little bit more, if anything, fencing style, some in the prequels, a little bit more kenjutsu. The biggest thing is, and this kind of happened in Acolyte, there was a little bit of Kali in there, Filipino stick fighting influence, especially when the splitting of the lightsabers. You know, when the Sith was able to split his blades the way that he had it. Doing that itself obviously forms a different style, and that was interesting. I thought it was good. Great time period. Nice Old Republic. There's Mandalorians everywhere. Lots of Jedi, lots of Sith. You could do just about anything. And I do think that's actually an interesting way of sort of looking at where to go for things.
For everything in one location, daily news, reviews, interviews, podcasts, video, and social media feeds. Bookmark FanthaTracks.com for Star Wars news 24/7, 365.
Outside of things, we've got Skeleton Crew, which I've watched a little bit of. It's not my cup of tea, folks. I will be honest. I can see, obviously, the influence of things like Goonies and other things of that sort of, it's set for kids, and that's what it should be. It's a good thing. And, of course, great cast, obviously, they've got in there too. And Bryce Dallas Howard in their directing as well. I think she's a really, really good director. Really on top form lately. She's also good acting in, was it Terminator Salvation? In amongst all that was going on in Salvation, she was sort of the grounded one that brought things back down to where they should be. When Christian Bale is often his little, that, especially the rant and all that sort of stuff that he was doing, she made that grounded and it made it real. So she's real talented, I think. And I think it's was it 2 years ago now? It feels like 2 years ago. And season 1 was the best Star Wars series I had seen. Yeah, Kenobi was fun for the most part. Mandalorian first season was pretty damn good too. But Andor and where it's heading, what's happened in it, the grittiness of it, that really felt like proper Star Wars. As much as it is obviously set in the universe of what we know, it was really well rooted in reality, grittiness. The vehicles were really well played out. I thought it was fantastic. And, the idea too that Stellan Skarsgård playing this rebellion intelligence sort of operative in amongst everything was just spot on. We all love him from, of course, another movie, and that is, of course, where he's eating too much cake, looking for spice. Dune. That's right, Denis Villeneuve's Dune. If you haven't seen Dune, then you bloody well should, shouldn't you? Get out there, get spicy, folks. Go and see Denis Villeneuve's Dune, Part 1 and Part 2. With that, we're going to head on to some other fun stuff. A few years ago, we looked at a great thing on here, which we're going to break down a little bit more in the coming weeks on here. And this is something I've always wanted to do a deeper read of. I've read these books a number of times, but the Han Solo adventures in particular are ones that I love coming back to. And the late, great Brian Charles Daley, who sadly passed away early at the age of 48, was just one of those interesting writers. I always come back to his work because obviously he did great work too in the Robotech era with, of course, his fellow writer James Luceno when they did the Jack McKinney novels. And that was a great continuation of a series, one that I really enjoyed from day one. And everyone that I know who had read those, you get the continuation that, of course, the creator wanted that with that one as well. Tonight, I'm going to talk a little bit more about Brian himself as a writer, his work, just give you guys a little bit more inside view of somebody who, when he was putting all these, especially the Han Solo stories together, there was nothing else out there. Really, I mean, you had Splinter of the Mind's Eye, yes, but this really was I think the right, at the time at least anyway, it was the right thing for people to check out and enjoy. Because, again, he was given pretty much carte blanche to do what he wanted for the most part. And I think that's what makes things interesting is you get somebody like that in there, they're always going to make it better and better and grow for a lot of the series, when you get characters like Han Solo, I mean, you could pretty much do anything you want. There's so many different things and involvement that you can do that will give you a clue to what the character's like. And we're going to look at where Brian Daley really got his ideas from, a little bit of his life, and in future episodes we're going to be reading through and really dissecting what make those novels, and of course, even then the comics later that adapt to those. He was the author of the Han Solo Adventures, a trilogy of novels, which, of course, featured Han Solo and Chewbacca. This is when they were going through the corporate sector and, of course, the Tion hegemony. This is before they later joined the Rebel Alliance and found some guy called Luke Skywalker and, of course, a princess called Leia. Obviously, he also wrote the radio dramas of the OT, the NPR radio dramas, and sadly, he died of pancreatic cancer shortly after the Return of the Jedi one was recorded. Daley and, of course, James Luceno used a pen name by the name of Jack McKinney to do all the novelizations of the Robotech series, so the actual cartoon itself. And then from there, they actually expanded that further. And then there was the Sentinel series they did, and they literally went right through to where Carl Macek wanted to grow it to as well. So with that too, they also did Black Hole Travel Agency series together, and also another animation one, which was the story editors on Adventure of the Galaxy Rangers, which I do remember towards the end of, must have been the 80s at the time. And of course, Luceno was worked on the series writing stuff. Daley also wrote the several science fiction and fantasy novels of his own, including also the novelization of the movie Tron.
Hi, I'm Duncan Poe, and you're listening to Fantha Tracks.
The book Jedi Academy Sourcebook was then dedicated to his memory, as was, of course, the dramatization of Return of the Jedi. Now, just to give you an idea of what he worked on too, folks, he worked on Han Solo at Star's End, Han Solo's Revenge, and Han Solo and the Lost Legacy. And this is all 79 for the first two and 1980 for the last one. He also worked on Star Wars Droids, The Protocol Offensive. So that's from a Star Wars perspective, you know. Obviously, he's done a lot more than that, folks. And we've talked a little bit about his background in, especially Robotech in particular. He was born in December 22, 1947, sadly passed away February 11, 96. He was born Brian Charles Daleys in Englewood, New Jersey, USA. He was born there to Charles and Mira Daleys. He also had an older brother, David, and a younger sister, Mira. He grew up in Rockley, New Jersey, and graduated from Northern Valley Regional High School in 1965. He also joined the Army and served a year-long tour of duty in Vietnam. After the Army, he then went to Jersey City State College, and that's now called New Jersey City University, and majored in media at the time. During that time, he wrote his first novel, which was called The Doomfarers of Coromandel. He went to write the first Star Wars spin-off novels, The Han Solo Adventures, the first book of the trilogy, and it was a New York Times bestseller at the time as well. Daleys' partner of 14 years, Lucia St. Clair Robson, was also an author of historical fiction as well. He also did a series which was edited by James Luceno, published after his passing, which was called Gamma Law. He did Smoke on the Water, 1997, Screaming Across the Sky in 98, Broken Country in 98, and Toward His End in 99. His other novels were Tapestry of Magics in 1983 and Kaduna Memories, written with Luceno under Jack McKinney in 1990. Many places you can find his work too. The big one is, of course, his official site, brian-daley.com. And you get a greeting message from Brian himself too, which was done in 1985. One of the things too, I think that's great about his writing too, is the sense of adventure of Star Wars is there. It's a real gritty and down-to-earth, but also whimsical way of creating, obviously, Han Solo's adventures. And folks, if you haven't read them, you really need to. They're such a wonderful series of books.
Well, that's all we have time for here tonight on the Fantha From Down Under. And we'll catch you next time, same place, same channel, and of course, with more Star Wars news in a single file from FanthaTracks.com's Australian edition. That's right, we'll catch you next time. So, until then, may the Force be with you, and enjoy your Star Wars fandom. We'll see you next time.
Warning, no Tauntauns were harmed in the filming and recording of this podcast.
Coming up next on Fantha Tracks Radio, it's Making Tracks.